Welcome back. You probably clicked on this episode and downloaded it hoping to hear us talk about Steve Harvey, and you will, but we didn't have an anecdote to open this with, so I just have a news article to discuss. This news article is brought to you by Mashable.com, written by Anna Iovine on November 14th of 2023, and it says that the Hookup app Field partners with users for rebrand. Naomi, have you heard anything about Field before?
Yes, a couple of my friends have used it and currently use it. So, yeah, I know what Field
Interesting.
is.
I
Yeah.
feel we've discussed it like at least once on this podcast, but not in detail. So, for those who are unfamiliar, Field, an app for sexual exploration aimed at singles and couples, announced a co created rebrand for its ninth anniversary. The app has reinvented itself before. Initially, it was called Threender. It's the letter 3NDR, so it's like Tinder, but with 3 in front. Very clever. When it launched in 2014, and it focused on, and you're not going to believe this, threesomes. Um, but the field of today is different, marked by curiosity and exploration of all stripes, not just couples looking for their unicorn. So, according to their press release, in conversations with users, personal transformation and embracing curiosity were running themes throughout the rebrand process. And then in a couple of days, these apps changes will hit. So 62% of field users hint at personal transformation in the first year on the app by switching up their sexuality, interests, desires, and who they want to connect with. You can display all of this on your profile. More than half, 57% of users who changed their sexuality on field mark a queer identity, representatives told Mashable. I guess that would mean 43% describe themselves as less queer, which is interesting. A third of straight men changed their sexuality to heteroflexible, bicurious, or bisexual. Over the course of a year, people on Field branch out and specify their different fantasies. Field users have a 42% increase in desire for bondage, 33% interest in FFM threesomes, 85% increase in fun, 26% increase in a friends with benefits situation, 58% increase in signaling being GGG, good giving and game, and 15% increase in a MFM threesome, and 32% increase in an MMF threesome. I don't really understand the difference between the two. And then finally, a 20% increase in finding switches. Now, Naomi, do you think this is primarily among young people or older individuals?
I'm going to say it's a good mixture of all of the above. I would say it's more heavily on there's a larger group of old people though. I wouldn't say that it's more young people than old people.
Yeah, it doesn't say how many older individuals are on Field, and I would imagine a lot of them are on like the older sites, like I think it's FetLife, that have existed for like 20 plus years. But you're correct. There are boomers on Field, and they are looking for threesomes. Boomers looking for threesomes on this app went up 520% in 2023.
Wow.
Half of all the users in the United States identify as something other than heterosexual. 10% are looking for people of any gender. 1 in 2 have a kink. Now, what's the big change they're making here? Well, the new look includes aura visuals to invoke a sense of self discovery. This is just a new logo and typeface, and it's designed to symbolize fluidity and tactility of the app community. They also are planning a 24-hour party to celebrate the rebrand. Now, I thought this was interesting. I wasn't too aware of this app before, like I stumbled across this article, but I do have a question for you, Naomi, and
Okay.
that is the number of people saying that they're bi-curious or queer indicative of people actually being bi-curious and queer, or is it these people have discovered they get more responses if they identify as something other than heterosexual?
Oh, that's a good point. I feel like by curious is obviously you're curious about it. You don't know if you like it necessarily, but you're willing to try it. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say that portion of the population that categorize themselves as bi curious, we can just throw out. Bisexual, I would say yes, that you like sometimes you like on this app specifically, you could get more responses if you seem more open to more things.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I don't think there's really any penalty on an app like this for identifying as like bisexual or bicurious. I think that like on a lot of other dating apps that might be considered a turnoff for some people because there's still like a stigma among individuals that bisexual people are less loyal or whatever. But like
Yeah.
here, obviously that's the name of the game. It's like for people who are like sexually open and inquisitive. And I think there's a stigma in this space, which is predominantly there's a far higher percentage of like queer individuals here than there are on normal dating apps. There's probably a stigma against like people who identify as straight heterosexual individuals because they're like, oh, those people are just looking for threesomes on this app. So I would imagine that like the percentage of people indicating that they have, queer identity is partially at least due to individuals who are just attempting to pick up women who they identify as like more attractive, subversive, whatever. I'm not saying any of this to be like there hasn't been this like renaissance of queer individuals in the United States. There's definitely been an upward trend of people who feel comfortable expressing themselves and like being openly queer. But I do think that the Field app, which again started primarily as a way for couples to pick up a third in their threesomes, might not be the place to identify any larger patterns about queer identity in the United States.
Yeah.
On to the episode.
To introduce both of us. Welcome back to I Would Know and Date These Guys. This is a podcast where we discuss sex, dating, relationships, and most often
Threesomes.
Steve Harvey.
Threesomes.
Steve Harvey.
Threesomes.
Steve Harvey.
Threesomes.
How
many threesomes do you think Steve Harvey's had?
Oh my god, I don't want to talk about Steve Harvey's sex life. All I think about is his wrinkly old dick at that point.
I mean, we did a lot in the last episode. I'm
Naomi Guy. That's Joel Guy, and welcome back to the podcast. Wow, that took a while. Let's get into the episode.
Naomi, we're back to discuss Steve Harvey's follow-up to Act Like Lady, Think Like a Man, titled Straight Talk, No Tracer. It's a title that I have a lot more difficulty remembering. Act Like Lady, Think Like a Man just rolls off the tongue, right? That had panache.
For real.
That had, like, marketing behind it. Before we jump into that episode, I do want to introduce this week's drink. It is a Jones Soda berry lemonade. The ingredients did not disclose what type of berry this is supposed to be, but it's like neon blue, like radioactive waste water. It's probably going to be good. I don't know. Jones Soda has been pretty good. No, it's fine. It's like a Blue Jolly Rancher. It's not very good. I can't even identify what berry it is. It's generic berry, artificial flavor. Not the best Jones Soda I've had. Not offensive, but not something I'd buy again. Naomi, do you recall some of the concerns we had about Steve Harvey's book in the first part of this series?
So, the concept behind our episode reflecting on this book is Joel will throw quotes at me that he'll like have me read, and then we'll reflect on them. So I don't know anything about this book other than our first episode. So I just want to give that out there. What I remember is that he is a misogynistic piece of shit, and he thinks that his book was the greatest thing to touch down on earth other than the Bible, because of course he's a God-fearing man. But he talks a little bit about his first marriage and how he should have been more ready for his marriage before walking into it so young. And he needed a purpose and he needed a good job to pay the bills, because obviously women can't pay bills. We just are not allowed to do that. He then talks about how his book was so amazing and it was so well written, but still women, because we're dumb, we had more questions. So he was like, I'm going to write another book that's just as good as the first one, but more in detail about me, my life. Not as, vague as it was before. There, in the first book, in Why Women Deserve Less. Wow.
Why you should act like a lady and think like a man.
In that first book that we read of Steve Harvey's, he talks about how women should think, more. Obviously it's in the fucking title, but he just basically comes up with this new book, and he's like, I'm gonna, answer all the questions that come up from that book, because women are dumb, and then he starts talking about his parenting style, which for me, I don't feel has anything to do with the subject of the book, but I'm just gonna let him deal with it. So at the end of last episode, our last quote was him texting back and forth with his sons, because apparently his sons have to do everything that he does on a daily basis in order to like prove themselves to him. It's really shitty and messed up. So anyways, that's what I remember.
Damn, that's honestly, Naomi, like that's a really
Thank you.
solid summary. You clearly are latching onto this content a lot more than why women deserve less.
No, honestly, it's a Freudian slip at this point.
Yeah. Naomi, so chapter 2 is titled Dating by the Decades, a guide to how men feel about relationships in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. So in this chapter, he's going to tell women the truth about what men are looking for decade
Okay.
by decade. Naomi, before I start giving you quotes, do you have any initial thoughts about what
He's
he's
gonna
going to
say
say?
that men in their 20s are scum and that you shouldn't look for a man at the club. You should look for a man at church. And then your 30s are you should focus on your career, but like meet a man at work. And then your 40s are you should already be settled. And if you're not settled by 40, you are a failure and all women hate you.
You're not completely off base. It's just that he's talking to women. He's trying to describe what men are like and what you should be looking for to pick up men of these age ranges.
Yeah.
So he's not like giving advice to men specifically.
Yeah.
He's telling women.
That's what I was
Okay,
saying.
just want to
Yeah.
make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay. So he opens this chapter and describes a little luncheon he had with his daughter recently. You want to read that to us?
Sure. I took my daughter Lori to lunch recently, just me and her, one on one. It was the first occasion we'd spent any quality time with each other without her mother, Marjorie, there to quarterback the flow of conversation. I mean, when I take my sons to lunch, the fellowship is pretty low key. I say, find yourself something to eat, man. They order and we eat. Everybody pushes back from the table happy and satisfied. But the idea of sitting in a restaurant alone with Lori made me come to terms with a couple of things. Namely, that I haven't had a clue what 13-year-old girls like, care about, or have on their minds.
Any thoughts?
Um, he doesn't spend enough time with his daughter.
He has literally never spent any one-on-one time with his daughter. He is either heavily exaggerating this, which I don't know why he would want to do that. It just makes him look like a bad dad, or he's just being completely open. It's like, what? Don't all dads never talk to their daughters without the mother in the room? Yeah, and so you have to remember from the first chapter that he's promoting this idea. Steve has promoted this idea that women need to understand how men think. And yet, his daughter is 13 years old, one of the females most directly related to him, and he's never bothered to explain the basics, which I find really weird because, like, I don't know what age he thinks young women should learn how men think. If he thinks that young men are all like devious and treacherous and scheming, you'd think you'd start them pretty young, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know why this is like such a low priority to him, but he feels it's important to write, multiple books telling other women how to think. So he goes on to describe how he freaks out at this lunch when his daughter starts asking about dating boys. And he calms down a bit when she explained that she was interested in dating older boys, but by that she meant 15 and 16. He says he learned a lot that day, that she had thought a lot about dating and marriage growing up, and then extrapolates that and concludes that all women have thought a lot about dating and marriage growing up, which is kind of like saying one of his teenage sons is really into British prog rock, therefore all boys are into British prog rock. I don't understand how he can come to that conclusion, but whatever. He says there's not a man he knows who's dreamed about his wedding day, and says clearly because men don't think about marriage the same way women do, he needs to explain to women how men actually think. So we're gonna start with a man in his 20s. We're gonna teach you, Naomi, what a man in 20s is actually thinking, so you know how to appeal to him.
Okay.
You know how to pick up a man in the 20s. How you're not gonna make any mistakes with men in their 20s. Boy, I cannot pace this.
I know. I'm watching it. A man in his 20s is just starting to discover the cornerstones of manhood: who he is, what he does, and how much he makes. He's deciding whether to go to college or not, whether to pick up a trade or not, whether to go to grad school or get a master's or not. He's using this decade to figure himself out, to figure out whether the kinks figure out the kinks before he settles down to the awesome responsibility of being a husband, a father, a homeowner, a man who's responsible
He
for the
should put those
well-being.
kinks on his dating profile on Field.
Yeah, he should,
Sorry,
honestly.
keep going.
That's exactly what I was thinking, though. A man who's responsible for the well-being of not just himself, but other people he loves. In most cases, we simply cannot expect that he'll be ready to provide financial stability and family direction for you when he's still trying to figure out how to make money, be solidified in his career, and make it on his own. By his mid 20s, he's going to be looking around in the workforce and noticing other men who are homeowners, have cars, and are taking care of families, and his financial clock is going to start revving up. That is disgusting. It ticks as loudly as a woman's biological clock does. We hear the calling to start proving we've got the who we are, what we do, and how much we make in order to prove that we are truly men. This isn't nearly as important in the college years because money isn't really all that relevant. Everybody there is broke and making their mark by becoming members of social organizations, playing sports, joining fraternities, and being a part of the fabric of campus life. But when he hits age 27 or 28, he starts seeing his boys drive up to the bar in the fancy car and step out in the fancy suit and whip out a business card featuring both his name and an impressive title in raised lettering. A man in his late 20s is going to want a piece of that action, a fancy car, title, and money of his own.
Interesting, interesting, interesting. This is weird advice because like half of men in the United States still don't go to college. So do their financial clocks hit like as soon as they're out of high school? I'm not sure why he's making this a college specific anecdote when such a large percentage of like the male dating pool probably has not been to college, but whatever. This is such a weird view of like how men perceive like success. He's describing like men at the club in their 20s seeing people pull up in their cars and show their business cards. It's like that scene from American Psycho where all the executives are like pulling out their business cards and they all look identical. It's this exaggeration of how like people view success. I also can't imagine a scenario where this works anymore unless like we're talking the upper echelons of like society, which is, you know, probably the circles that he strides in. Like most people do not walk into a club in a fancy suit and like pull out their business card and are like, I'm Tim, executive VP at the Citigroup local branch. I don't think that gets you a better table or like preferential treatment or like free lap dances. Am I off base?
No, I don't know. I obviously don't run in those circles, so I can't say for sure, but it doesn't seem like this is realistic other than in like a reality TV show where everyone decides that they're going to show off their wealth in that way, you know? Because the vast majority of people just don't do that.
This is like an episode of like Kicking It with the Kardashians. What's that show?
Keeping up with the Kardashians, kicking it with the
Keeping up
Kardashians.
with the Kardashians. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, okay, maybe if you're a multi-billionaire and you're like going out to eat, people are going to be like, "Oh shit, one of the Kardashians is here. Like I'm going to give them a nice table. I'm going to, you know, let them in past the line. I'm going to, you know, give them free drinks cuz you know, I know they're going to, you know, Instagram this, TikTok this, whatever, and you know, let all their followers know how cool of a place to hang it is." But this is just like not a normal experience most people have. It's probably realistic when you think about like again the experiences Steve Harvey has, but like Steve Harvey is not the same as the average person, so this advice just isn't applicable. But I guess like let's talk about you and your dating life, Naomi. Would you say that this like worldview is emblematic of the men you've been on dates with in the last couple of years?
I would say that the vast majority of like the stupid men that I've been on like one date with for obvious reasons, I would say like to show off their like not their wealth, but just like to show off that they can provide in that sense, which is weird because like I've had men say like I always try to go Dutch on which is if for people that don't know, like you go 50-50 on a date. I always like to do that because I don't know, I just feel weird going on a date with somebody that I don't know and having them pay for my food. Like that just makes me feel weird for some reason. So I always ask like, "Hey, would you like to go Dutch on this?" Um and The I would say about 50% of the men that I have gone on a date with say, like, something along the lines of, "Oh, you're too pretty to do that," or, "Oh, you're like,
What?
I'm paying for this," or something like that, which is
You're too
interesting.
pretty to have money on you.
Yeah, obviously. You should just have your lip gloss. Like, the fuck? No. Which is interesting because I feel like this comes with like any political background, any because I feel like the vast majority of the time when you're dating a conservative man, it's like, oh, I need to be the provider. But even with men that identify as like more liberal or more left, I would say still have that mindset too. But obviously, there were never second dates in those situations, and I don't know if it was because they thought that that's what I wanted or if that's just how they did things. So I wouldn't say like, oh, they like to show off their wealth in that like fancy car kind of way, but I wouldn't say that it's totally out of the realm of possibility.
Well, it's interesting too because what you're describing is like showing off the wealth through like displays of wealth, not
Mhm.
through displays of providing, right? It's let me get you a nice steak, or let me get you, bottle service. Let me get you, a fun, date at the axe throwing, whatever. It's not, hey, I'm going to, fill up your car with gas. I'm going to, make sure your fridge has groceries in it for the week, which I understand is not like what happens on a first date. But yeah, he's describing men as like in this, how do I, get lots of resources and money kind of way. But here he is also being like, they just like throwing away stuff, trying to show off ladies that they're, successful, which doesn't seem like they're in the providing state. I don't know. I guess my problem with this is also that it's non-falsifiable. Again, we talked in the first part about how Steve has set up the argument in such a way that he literally cannot be proven wrong, and this is another example of that. Like, I cannot personally prove as a young man in my 20s, I don't want these things, right? Even if I say that I don't want those things and that I'm happy to drive my Nissan Leaf and I haven't seen anyone at the clubs pulling out a business card in 3 years, maybe I'm just lying to everyone, including myself,
Yeah,
right?
obviously.
Like, there's no way to prove that Steve Harvey is wrong here, which again, really good for your argument, Steve, but not good if you're trying to be like honest and actually give people good information. So here's what he says about what this means for your relationship.
Sure, there are examples of men who can get their careers together, make an adequate amount of money, and be happy enough that with their station in life to settle down at this age. But it's more likely that a man at this stage is not going to take any relationships with the opposite sex all that seriously.
I don't fully disagree. I mean, I understand where he's coming from, but again, like, I don't know what percentage of the male population this would apply to. So I don't know how helpful of advice this is. It's interesting because if we look at another book, like, say, Why Women Deserve Less, Aaron Clary will talk about how important it is to like have children and how important it is to settle down in relationships because he's like, oh, that's the ideal structure, it's how it's always been. And we discussed how there's like kind of a fascist overtone to that, where he's like, reproduce, we need lots of workers for the economy because the most important thing is to be like a strong worker participating in the economy. And here, Steve Harvey, I would still argue, is doing like a conservative approach to dating, but he's like, don't settle down, don't get married, wait until you're mature and have responsibility. um yeah, it's interesting how they're in a similar ocean of dating advice, but like come to dramatically different conclusions about what people should do with the information they're giving them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the vast majority of people that I know that are currently like actively dating, like different, like lots of different people, I would say the vast majority of men don't want to settle down in their 20s. And it takes them
Yeah.
months to even say, like, oh, I have feelings for you or something like that. And I don't know if that's the culture now where it's like, oh, I can't be, I can't be emotional. I can't like show any of my true colors or something, and I can't be vulnerable around this person. Or if it's something that's like totally different and it's always been this way, it's just more prevalent now because we have birth control. So it's like more socially acceptable to continue to sleep with someone even if like you aren't sharing your emotions with them. So um I don't know what exactly it is, but I would say the vast majority of men do not wanna settle down, and when they want all the privileges of a girlfriend, but they don't want the title of a girlfriend, so they don't feel bad when they go
Right.
out and fuck somebody else.
Yeah, and I think, part of that is led by dating apps, where, like, dating apps, the grass is always greener on the other side. There's always a
Exactly.
prettier girl. There's
Yeah.
always someone out there who, matches you better. And so, there's going to be a lot of young men. I mean, I'm sure this applies to some young women, but I think culturally we understand it's more of a young men thing where they're like, hey, I don't need to treat relationships as all too serious because I like have a very realistic option of, settling down with someone who's more attractive, just a couple weeks down the line if I just keep swiping.
Yeah.
It's interesting that he gives this advice, saying never get married to any man younger than 30. And I was interested how this advice plays with the ages people actually get married. I did a quick check about marriage rates, and oh no, Naomi. Oh no. I got some bad information for Steve. So Bowling Green State University had an article from November 9th of 2020 by Paul Hemez. Naomi, do you know which state is the Bowling Green state?
No idea.
I don't know either. I was going to give you like 10 points if you had just given me any state. The article was titled Distributions of Age at First Marriage from 1960 to 2018. So this is part of their National Center for Family and Marriage Research and is looking at, what are the average ages people are getting married and how does that change over time? So Paul says in 1960, men's median age at first marriage was about 22.8, and women were first married at a median age of 20.3. However, 55 years later, those ages had increased to 29.2 and 27.1 for men and women, respectively. This increase is noteworthy, but it does not reveal whether or not the span or distribution of ages at which men and women marry has widened or shrunk over time. So, using 1960 and 1990 vital statistics data for marriage certificates and the 2018 American Community Survey, this profile explores changes in the age distributions of men's and women's first marriages. So, men's age at first marriage distribution. In 1960, the majority, 54% of men who married for the first time, did so between the ages of 20 and 24. Okay?
Okay.
By 1990, this share had declined to 35%. In 2018, the most common age group to which men first married was 25 to 29, with about 1/3 of men first marrying between these ages. Men who first married before their 20th birthday made up about 18% of newly married men in 1960. By 2018, the share had declined to 3%. Among men who married for the first time, the share who were 30 years or older more than quadrupled from 11% in 1960 to 49% in 2018. So Steve is saying somewhere between 51 and 89% of all marriages from the past 60 years were probably bad because the guy was a joker who was just trying to make some quick cash at the Ford plant. That seems like a very bold claim.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to disagree that marriages between older people who have figured themselves out are probably going to be happier and healthier, but that just seems like a really bleak and extreme perspective on like when you should be marrying. Here's the other side of the coin. So for women, women's age at first marriage distributions, between 1960 and 1990, there was little change in the diversity of women's age at first marriage. By 2018, however, women's ages at first marriage became more diverse. In 1960, about 1 in 6, 16% of women who married for the first time were younger than the age of 18. 16% of women in 1960 were marrying before they were 18, Naomi.
Damn.
And only about 1 in 15, 6% of women were 30 or older when they first married. So, like,
Ooh.
all these stereotypes about, like, if you don't get married before age 24, you're just going to be a spinster.
Yeah.
There does appear to be some truth to that. I mean, that's not a good thing. That's just, like, society being like, I want young, fresh women. But, yeah, there's definitely a cultural stereotype there for a reason. 30 years later, in 1990, these shares had reversed. About 4% of women in 1990 experienced a first marriage before age 18.
Oh my
And
god.
16% were 30 or older. By 2018, fewer than 2% of women's first marriages occurred to those less than 18, where 40% of women were 30 or older. In 1990, 41% of women who married for the first time were 20 to 24. This proportion nearly halved by 2018 to 21% as the modal age group shifted from 25 to 29. So, some interesting trends there. But again, like, that's a very interesting implication for Steve to be like, you really shouldn't marry anyone in their 20s because they haven't had stuff figured out. And then you look at the actual marriage data, and it's like, Steve, you are talking about the vast majority of the population from 1960 to present.
Huh. I don't know. I would say
I mean, and go ahead, go
no,
ahead.
I was just saying, like, I would say that the vast majority of people that I know, but it might just be because we grew up in like a weirdly religious high school. I would say the vast majority of them are going to be married within the next 5 years. Like, I know a lot of people that are already married
Yeah.
that I went to high school with, but and I just turned 23, so I would say that that is, a little odd to think about getting married right now. But at the same time, I totally understand that like getting married young and divorced is completely an option as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know someone in my friend circle who, they got married in their 20s and they got divorced and they got remarried within about a year and a half. And yeah, I think it's hard to figure out what you're looking for in a relationship. And I don't think that necessarily means that you can't get married. I think we have a lot of cultural ideas about like what marriage means and how it's this like lifetime bond and whatnot. But frankly, for a lot of people, it's probably just tax benefits. Like you can talk about the affection and the symbolism and all of that and how it's important to people like culturally and how they want to like do right by their parents. But like a lot of people getting married are probably doing so not for any of those reasons, but because they want, a couple $1,000s back from the federal government. All that other stuff is great, but like it does come down to like finances in today's age. And I
Yeah.
don't think that means that like getting married younger is inherently bad. I think also, one of the reasons Steve is saying that like men in their 20s are, not marriage material is because the economy's fucked up, right?
So
If the
true.
economy actually had good opportunities for people, young men would probably, under Steve's own like framework of analysis, feel a lot more comfortable with themselves, be more willing to commit themselves. And so, like, I don't know if this is what he's saying per se, but it certainly sounds like he's like, as a general rule, don't marry people in their 20s. But you could imagine a situation where, like, everything turns around, the economy gets better, pensions come back, people are, engaged in unions, they have strong benefits and whatnot, and they feel comfortable getting married. And I think this advice would be, like, horribly outdated because of that. So yeah, I don't know. This is weird ass advice from Steve, who's trying to be like paternalistic and like tut tut tut. He doesn't feel like the person to say it. Like, I don't know. There's something about like older people coming from affluence lecturing people who are much younger who don't have the same economic opportunities or resources that they have. It's kind of offensive. It's like you have no idea what you're talking about. Yes, you went through some hardship, but right now, like, you do not have the perspective of people in this situation. If you want to get married, you're both happy, the relationship's going well, you just want it to continue, go ahead, have some barbecue in your backyard and call it a day. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. There was one more thing about people in their 20s that I wanted to touch upon before we finish up with the people in their 20s, who are the people Naomi's dated, right? Naomi hasn't dated anyone in their 50s, I hope.
I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, brother. So here's what he says about like dating people in their 20s. Don't marry them, but
You can determine whether he has potential, though. The key here is remembering that the word potential implies he's capable of taking action. A man who has potential isn't sitting on the couch. He got a firm plan for what he wants to do with his life and is on his way to being what he says he wants to be. He's got a short-term plan. Maybe it includes school or earning enough money to start a company that he thought through and for which he created a business plan. And he's got a long term plan, one that cements how his goal will play out in the future. If he's got no plan, can't articulate his future, and doesn't appear to be working toward any goals, this isn't the guy you want to hang on to.
so it's interesting that men he considers desirable are those who are innovators, not people in reliable full-time jobs with pensions.
Yeah.
Like this seems really nitpicky, but you could imagine someone who started in a government job which will not have a stable pension, which will have a stable pension in 30 years, who is fine just vibing until retirement, right? They might not want to be promoted. They might not have career goals. They might just want to play video games and smoke weed on the weekends.
Yeah.
Or they might have specific non-career goals, like getting better at basketball or learning all of like the states and learning all of like the state flowers. But those things aren't important to him. Bettering yourself mentally is not the same to Steve as bettering yourself financially and or breaking out of society's expectations. Steve, I pulled the stats, 55% of adults have started a business in their lives. Many of them have failed. It's very easy to create an LLC. But that doesn't mean 45% of people are worthless. And even people who start a business sometimes fail because, running a business takes a lot more than just can do. It's also a matter of luck. So that's like a really weird theme for Steve. He's like, men need to have like the resources to keep their women safe and keep their family together, but also don't take any of the jobs that would actually give you resources in a guaranteed way. Do the risky stuff like I did.
When was this book published?
I think this was 2013.
Okay.
Act Like a Lady came out in 2011, and this was like hastily thrown together to follow it.
So this was post-recession.
Yes. This book, wait, what the fuck?
What?
This book came out in 2010. So I think Act Like a Lady came out in 2009, and this came out in 2010. This would be like before there was full recovery. That's really weird.
It makes a little bit more sense, like that. Me playing devil's advocate here, it makes a little bit more sense why he would say that. But at the same time, you're completely right that it isn't, a relationship shouldn't just be based around a person's potential or a person's financial worth. Anyways, moving on. Next quote.
Wait. So sorry. One comment on that. I think that's really smart if he's playing devil's advocate and he's like, hey, just keep in mind, even like a guaranteed career isn't anything. But that just further disproves his assertion about the 90-day rule that we discussed last time. If no job is like guaranteed, if no job has security, the 90-day rule doesn't work. It doesn't prove that the person getting the job actually has any security. It doesn't prove that the business offering it actually cares about the person. So that whole analogy falls apart even further.
I don't know. That was a weak analogy to start with, so I don't know how you can have it fall apart. Yeah.
Okay. This is about 20-year-olds still.
Oh, okay. You also have every right to study what kind of man he's shaping up to be, whether he's a respectful, courteous, treats you the way you want to be treated, and is a law-abiding citizen. You deserve to know, too, whether he has hopes and dreams and a sound relationship with God. If he has children, you should be investigating for yourself what kind of man he is to his children and the relationship he has with his kid's mother. You should also be clear that he wants to be in a monogamous relationship and be able to trust that he's acting like he is one when he's around you. Also, when he's not around you. What the fuck? All of these things are an indication of what kind of husband he'll end up being when he's ready to settle down. It's like my couch used it's like my couch. It's like my coach used to tell me.
It's like my Burka Lounger. I used to watch ESPN and used to tell me.
It's like my coach used to tell me, you're going to play the game the way you practice it. If he's not monogamous while dating you and his heart isn't morally into doing right by women, what's going to be different when you get married? The only thing that changes after the ceremony is the third finger on your left hand. Everything else stays the same. Okay, that's good advice. I would say that's good advice.
I agree. No, totally. That's probably the best advice in this whole book.
Yeah.
If, you can't trust your partner before you get married, you should not anticipate your partner will be any different.
Well, I wouldn't even say trust. I would just say the way they act in general. Just like if you guys are fighting before the wedding is not, like, the marriage is not going to fix anything. It's literally just going to be you're more like you are now together legally by government standards, and now you have to sign a lot more paperwork to break up.
But Naomi, it will fix everything: having a baby together.
Oh my god. Anyways, so be up to you to be clear about what you require to feel mentally and emotionally satisfied that the man you're with can fulfill those requirements. The man who truly wants you will accelerate for you. He will pick up the pace and walk in step with you. You can't change him, By his late 20s, he will have solidified who he is as a man. You can bring out his best qualities. He will be what you want him to be if he knows what will make you happy.
So once again, it's women's responsibility to fix everything in relationships and be happy. Men are not interested at all, so it's all women's fault if they don't get what they want out of the relationship. Great.
I don't know. I feel like this is a way of saying put your expectations out early, and if he doesn't follow your expectations of what you want in a relationship, then move on because he's not going to change. And a wedding isn't going to change anything.
That's fair. No, I think that's probably maybe a better perspective. Naomi, you're calling me on my cynicism, and I appreciate that. Um, I mean, I guess the whole direction of the chapter is like women take responsibility for relationships. Here's what you need in order to do so. But I understand where you're coming from, where it's like, ladies, if you're unsatisfied in the relationship, cut your losses. That'll make you happier in the long term. It's not your responsibility to save every relationship. You can take like control and go live by yourself and be single. That's fair. No, that's totally fine. Believe it or not, that's it for the chapter. He does go on and
What?
describe like people in their 30s to 50s and all that, but like I don't think we can really comment on those, and I think it's probably worth noting he's probably wrong about a lot of this due to the financial situation of Gen Z. Like he
Yeah.
describes a lot of people in their 30s through 50s as like financially secure, and because they're financially secure, they're thinking about things like what their family's going to be like, when they're going to be able to like raise their kids and have like fun with them, what sort of legacy they're leaving behind. And I'm like, Gen Z has nowhere near the same home ownership rates, and the likelihood they're going to have steady careers is a bit lower than prior generations. So what they care about is probably going to be more related to simple survival than prior generations. So I don't think that's like his fault, but I do think this dates the book even further because like the economic conditions 10 years ago were completely different than what they are now.
I wonder if he tried to write this as a timeless dating advice book or not. Because, like, you know, when you walk into like a bookstore, like a used bookstore, and you like pick up like a self help book and it's like, email your boss and get more, or like write a letter to your boss. And it's like from the 90s. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I wonder if it's the same where he was like trying to write a timeless book or if it's like he was just wasn't even thinking about that.
You gotta print your resume on a high quality card stock. You gotta walk into businesses, shake their hands,
Yep,
give them a copy of your resume, let them know you're serious, and you could be hired on the spot. Good
exactly.
advice.
Yeah.
So, like, wrapping up this chapter, I guess the reason I wanted to discuss this was once again, Steve admits in his own words, per his conversation with his daughter, that he doesn't really follow his own advice in his own life and pretends that his views on the world are accurate despite the data presented to him. He gives these like caricature ideas of people that seemingly ignore perfectly normal partners in favor of prioritizing people following his life path, which I don't think is helpful or applicable advice. He thinks that poor people and people younger than 30 shouldn't marry, which I think is kind of a dick move. And also, given how many people marry who are poor and whatever, seemingly indicates that he condemns all those. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, job stability is cool. Finding someone you care about and spending the rest of your life with is cool. Having hobbies that aren't work is cool. I feel bad that like Steve is telling people those things are not worth pursuing. Those are not things that are valuable.
I don't know.
We go to this chapter, Naomi?
Yeah, it's just Steve being Steve, though, you know?
Steve being Steve.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I got a new one, Naomi. You're gonna love this chapter. The chapter
Okay.
is titled Are Women Intimidating? Myths versus Facts.
Oh, God. I want to hear
Oh,
some
thank
of his
God,
myths.
facts.
Yeah, I want to hear the myths, though.
Oh, we're gonna get through the myths. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So here's where he's busting out the research. He's, providing high quality scientific data. No, no, no. I'm just messing with you. This is just his opinion again. He starts the chapter by saying, "Act like a lady was super successful." So, again, he's like, "Well, I'm just, the smartest man in the world who sold a bajillion copies of a book. So what do I know?" And he says that spawned a bunch of replies from people on forums and on the internet and like emailing him and talking on talk shows. And these people, mostly women, were saying that they were alone, not because they didn't follow his rules, but because men were intimidated by them. And he goes, au contraire, that's not the case. Again, this is him being like, actually, if you don't follow my advice, it's your fault. There's no other reasons that like I could be wrong. So non-falsifiable, whatever. But this entire chapter is him arguing that men actually are more than willing to pursue successful women. And if you're a successful woman who doesn't get men, it's not that men are grappling with outdated notions of masculinity that might require education or therapy. It's that you, successful woman, haven't tried hard enough to be likable.
Ooh.
Um, Notice the phrasing of each of these myths and consider whether or not you consider it to be persuasive. We'll discuss that closer to the end. So here's the first section we're going to talk about.
Sorry, but as the title of this book suggests, I'm going to have to give it to you straight, no chaser, and at my own peril, take one for the team. In the minds and hearts of most men, the notion that a guy is intimidated by your success is nothing more than an excuse. A convenient way for some women to rationalize why they're alone. Harsh, but true. When we're away from womenfolk and talking among ourselves out on the golf course or on the basketball court or while enjoying a cigar at the bar, we men give a chuckle, shake our heads, and wonder aloud, who told you this madness? Because nothing really could be further from the truth. Men don't mind strong, independent, and capable women by any stretch. What we do mind is feeling like we're not needed. Believe it or not, there is a difference.
You know, when I'm at the boys, when I'm with the boys, drinking a brewski after a game of pickup basketball, you know what I like talking about, Naomi? How stupid women are for thinking we're intimidated by them.
Yeah, I do that too, actually, all the time. Myth one. Myth one. Men don't like women who talk about their material success. The truth. If you've got a degree or two, a fancy car, a nice place to lay your head at night, and a paycheck that'll make a Fortune 500 CEO drop his jaw in awe, we are happy for you. Yes, you read that right. Happy. It doesn't anger us, turn us off, or deliver a crushing blow to our self esteem and ego if a woman has done well for herself and is living a splendid life. But if that's the defining element of your life, if this is what you live and die for, and the first thing out of your mouth after you introduce yourself in is the year and make of your car, the purchase price of your fancy home, your credit score, followed by the single strong independent female creed, I don't need a man to take care of me, then guess what we're going to translate that into? Your services are not needed here. And we will take our services elsewhere while you climb that corporate ladder alone, worship alone, raise your child alone, shop alone, or with your girlfriends, take all your vacations alone, or with your girlfriends, only to return home alone. There's nothing wrong with being alone, mind you. Plenty of women are on their own, content with lives full of good friends and great experiences that don't necessarily involve committed relationships with the opposite sex. Yet, for every woman who says she's just fine by herself, there's a whole host of others who really are unsettled by the idea that they may not find the happily ever after that they thought they would be waiting for once they acquire the career, money, and status they worked so hard to get, and who really do believe that all their hearts that with all their hearts that they're alone because men are intimidated by or jealous by their success.
Does Steve not know that lesbians exist?
Does Steve not understand that the vast majority of men are insecure and dumb?
So to start with, I'm like, is this actually a stereotype of women? Like, I've never heard of this, like, shrill, high pitched, successful career woman who talks about nothing but her own success. I can't think of anybody in my life who fits that description. Can you think of anyone like that?
No, not a single person.
Yeah, so like he's painting, in my mind, kind of a fake stereotype. It honestly resembles one of the characters from the Act Like the Lady movies. You know, the lady who was like the CFO at that magazine or whatever,
Yeah.
and she wouldn't shut up about how successful she was, and her boyfriend was like, "I asked you how you were doing, not how successful you were, lady." And she's like, "Oh, ha 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 ha! You're so cute and charming and so good of a cook. I forgive you. I'm gonna give up my high successful big shit big dick paying job in New York City to live with you because you're just so handsome." I
Joel,
think
I don't know what
that's
you're
what happened.
talking
I'm pretty
about.
sure that's what
Is
happened.
that's the plot to every single Hallmark movie ever.
That's true. But yeah, like I feel again he's kind of like manufacturing this like stereotype of a woman to justify why men like treat women poorly who are successful. And I don't think this stereotype exists. I just think men treat women poorly when they're successful. Keep in mind, he's not actually disproving the myth, he's just redefining the terms to say that he's right. He objectively admits here that men don't like feeling like they aren't needed. And one of the ways they don't feel needed is when women talk about their material possessions. And that makes them less likely to pursue those women. But somehow, that's not men not liking material successful women. That's men not liking relationships where they can't prove they're a provider, which is often in a relationship where a woman provides stuff. Weird. Like, he's not disproving the myth. He's literally saying men don't actually want to date women who talk about their material success. He's just redefining the terms. You with me?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to completely agree with him. I think it's fair to say that people who talk about their material success are less attractive, but I don't think that's unique to women. I think that's true of men and women. You were literally just talking about in the prior section about how men were like trying to flaunt their success and being like, "Oh, I'm so much, wealthier and more handsome and accomplished than you are." I also think that our generation, people of our age, consider materialism maybe a little less sexy than prior generations, but I would argue that that might be tied to stuff like everyone being poor, so flaunting wealth is uncouth, or people's environmental concerns and like consumerism being bad in their eyes, or the ethics of supporting, luxury companies like Tesla.
Yeah, but
So I don't think
Joel,
this is a unique argument to women.
Joel, the difference is that we are focused now solely on how dumb women are. We're not talking about men. We're just talking about how dumb women are in this book.
That is true. This book should be called Straight Talk Women Are Dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
Act like a dummy, you dummy. Okay, let's talk about myth 2 after he's done such a great job disproving myth 1.
Myth 2. Men don't approach strong women because they're intimidated by them. The truth. We're not intimidated by strong women. Intimidation is just another word for fear. And although men are afraid of a lot of things, women aren't one of them. We can't kick our behinds, and short of that, little scares us initially. We don't care. Oh, sorry. You can't kick our behinds. Initially, we don't even care how many kids you have or what your dreams and goals and ambitions are. We just want to talk to you. But we will only do it if it looks like you won't give us attitude simply for approaching you. Give us some credit. We're way more crafty than you think. Believe me when I tell you. Men are hunters by nature, predators who, if we're not looking for anything serious, will look for the easy kill. The woman who's dressed provocatively, who's a little loud, who's tossing back drinks and dancing suggestively, sends out the signal that she's down for whatever, won't have a problem filling up her dance card with a bunch of guys who won't be remotely serious about her. She's going to be the ultimate throwback for the man who's sport fishing, a man who looks for a woman to use and toss back into the water. Wow.
Don't be a sports fish, Naomi.
I'm not a sports fish, I can tell you that much. I am a regular fish. You can toss me back if you want to.
Okay, so he says that little scares men besides things that can kick their butts. And I feel that's a sexist statement because it puts men in this like hyper masculine box where expressing emotion is bad in his mind. He's like, men they're not afraid of anything. We're all strong willed. And I'm like, men aren't scared of cancer. They're not scared of the dark. They're not scared of like upcoming bills and having only $20 in their checking account. They're not scared of like the upcoming death of their father. They're not scared of getting peanut butter stuck on the roof of their mouth. Not living their childhood dreams of becoming a quarterback. Right? Steve wants to paint this picture. He wants to be right. He wants to say men are simple. But like, he's erasing so much of their humanity and nuance by doing so. He's doing the exact same shit that tells men it's wrong to go to therapy to talk about their feelings because that's too feminine or whatever. Right? It's really dismissive of like men having a rich inner world, and he's doing it just so he can be right when he was talking about his prior book.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
also,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all I had to say. I'm just in complete agreement.
Yep, be wrong. The other thing is, and this isn't his fault that he's like behind the times, but we discussed this in the Why Women Deserve Less episodes. Women also hunted. They also gathered lots of calories when they were like in the state of
That's
nature.
what I was thinking about.
And so like he wants to portray men as like predators, and I'm like, That's not an evolutionary biology thing, bud. That might just be men being raised to like treat women as disposable. Sorry, like women did exactly the same things that you're talking about, and they don't appear to have this notion. So
Yeah,
maybe we should talk to young men. Maybe fathers should have this conversation, not like how they're cranking it in the gym when their kids are asleep at 4 a.m.
they also talked about how men are hunters and how women we talked about this how women were the ones who brought in the vast majority of the calories and how they were the
Yeah.
providers in that sense, and men only hunted things that they could get the easy kill. So you're wrong again, Steve Harvey.
Also, wait, I don't want to be beating this horse too much, but like he keeps using this phrase sports fishing. Maybe we discussed this when we talked about it in I think part 3 of Act Like a Lady Think Like a Man episodes. But like if you're sports fishing, typically you're looking for big fish. So you aren't picking any fish you want out of the water. You're being highly selective. Maybe there's sports fishing where it's like catch as many fish as you can in an hour or whatever. But like when I think of like sports fishers, I'm not thinking of a guy with like 50 fish in a bucket. I'm thinking of a picture of a guy holding like a 10-foot carp or something.
I have no idea. I have literally no idea of anything about sports fishing, so I'm just gonna let you have this one.
Thank you, Naomi. I
Yeah,
appreciate
of
that.
course.
Listeners, let me have this one. Don't call in being like, Joel, I've sports fished for 10 years. Naomi, let's wrap up this myth. Can you read that other section?
If men aren't approaching you, it's not because you're intimidating, but because they're too busy focusing on the woman who isn't cold and callous, the one who's smiling and comfortable with herself and appears to be having a good time, even if she's sitting alone. If a woman looks engaging, will engage her. But if she looks like one of those cold women who will meet our advances with hostility and act disinterested when any man even looks at in her direction, well, yeah, men aren't going to talk to her. Who needs the hassle? Who wants that hassle?
Okay, so think about this. Per Steve, men are more than willing to date women who are professionally successful.
Mm-hmm.
But he implies that these women are uptight and always look miserable, and men are far less likely to pursue them than outgoing and friendly women who, by implication, are probably less successful in what he considers throwback territory. So he's saying a woman who is financially successful will get lots of dates if they adopt the same attitude as women he considers not worth long term relationship material.
Yeah.
Now here's the problem with that. How do you distinguish between a man who's interested in you and potentially a good provider and a man who just considers you throwback material if men are going for women who they consider to be open because they want to have lots of sex with them, not because they consider them suitable partners?
You're just going to have to talk to them and find out, Joel. You're overthinking this.
Oh God, talk to the partner. But
Yeah.
but again, he's saying women who are flirtatious and open on the dance floor are not worth long-term relationships. And in the last book, he was like, men, don't date women who, have all their goodies out on the dance floor, right? They're not worth it. They're not serious. They're not going to be good mothers. But he's also telling women who he's like, you're serious, you got your shit together, to do the exact same thing. So suddenly his advice to men isn't helpful because now men can't even distinguish which women are the ones they want to go for.
Joel, this is the perfect example of the stupid shit that we read in Why Women Deserve Less. You have to be provocative, but not provocative, like too provocative. You have to be good natured and godly, but you can't be too godly because then you're a prude. It's the perfect
Yeah,
analogy for that, which is just you can't be too much of one thing and you can't be too much of the other.
sure. But again, this is a myth where like he hasn't addressed the actual content and the advice contradicts things that he said before in a major way. Let's get to myth 3, Naomi. Myth 3 is that men cannot be in relationships with women who make more money. Do you see anything weird about that framing?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not honest framing, right? No one is making the argument there has never and will never be a relationship where the women made more money. They argue that men feel uncomfortable and that they have found difficulty maintaining relationships where they make more money than a male peer. An actual good framing for this would be myth 3: men are often uncomfortable in relationships where women make more money. But that's a lot harder for him to disprove and is probably actually the case, right? He's just presenting incredibly weak formulations of his critics' arguments and knocking them down one by one. It's like winning an Olympic gold medal in a race against a toddler.
Race against a toddler.
So, why don't you read the first line of this myth?
A man who makes less money than you isn't holding it against you. He's taking it out on himself.
Any thoughts on that deep insight into the psychology of men?
I think this is fucking dumb and it just shows insecurity. Like, he's literally saying, like, oh, we don't fear anyone, we're not intimidated by you, blah, 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 blah. You're literally just
Yeah.
disproving that.
Like, I don't want to be a dick, but
No,
isn't
be a
this just
dick.
like saying, okay, isn't this just like saying your partner doesn't beat you because he hates you or because you're doing a bad job in the relationship? He does it because he has low self esteem,
Yeah.
right? Like, that doesn't make it better. It's maybe a more truthful statement than the first one, but also the end result is bad either way. This definitely indicates that men have a strong preference to not be in relationships with women who make more money, too, which kind of disproves the whole point. But I don't know. I feel Steve just hasn't thought through any of this, and again, just wanted to churn out a book to his incredibly successful Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. Here's the other part of that section.
These days, with the economy influx and men losing their jobs only to leave their women the biggest and sometimes the sole breadwinners in the house, there are more examples of unions that fit this bill than ever before. But it is not easy by any stretch for a man to swallow that, and it's going to take some serious strategizing to make this work. His difficulty handling the financial imbalance isn't about you, it's about him. He's not intimidated by or mad at you for succeeding. It's more that he's ashamed that he's not growing with you. If he's not moving forward financially or in terms of his status and position, if he's not accomplishing anything special or feels like he's not living up to his promise as a man to provide for his family, then he's going to have problems seeing where he fits into the equation, particularly if it involves changes that he didn't sign up for. Say you've gotten a promotion and now that you're taking more phone calls, answering more emails, and going on more business trips, whereas he's stuck at the house, trying to keep the kids quiet while you're at work or taking them to school and picking them up because you're not there to do it as regularly as you used to. If this wasn't something he's going to if this wasn't something he was doing before and those changes came along without any discussion or agreement about how familial and household responsibilities were going to be divided up, your man is either going to begrudge his new position or rail against it. For a man to go from being a working man all his life to playing Mr. Mom will take a toll on him. When he's going against everything that feels like the natural order of things and he's forced to play a role that falls outside your skill set without your permission or your partner's acknowledgement of what you're going to be going through, it's a hard pill to swallow. If your man didn't raise his hand and agree to be Mr. Mom, get ready for some degree of rebellion. Some men can make the adjustment, but some can't.
You think that's fair?
Feel like in every successful relationship, though, if it's going to be successful, you one need to communicate, hey, this is what's
Hmm.
going to be going on. I have a new promotion. My job title is going to change as well as my role in, the household. But also, there should be a general standard of equalness of home duties. Obviously, if you're not working, you're going to be taking care of the children more. What the fuck are you
Not
going
to
to be doing?
Steve.
What are you going to be doing if you're not fucking working? Okay, great. Pick up the kids from school. I can't do everything. Like, I just don't understand. so annoyed right now.
I mean, think about what he said in the last book. He had this section in the last book where he's like, look, men may huff and gruff and blow the house down, but they know that women secretly run the world. They know women run the household. Despite what they say, they know you're in charge of everything and making the lunches. And I think back then we also commented, we're like, well, then step up, bud. Step up and do some extra work. Help your partner around the house. Don't make her do everything. But like, even if this is a good insight in the male psychology, I wonder if it's even worth to say this when probably a lot of women feel similarly. Like a lot of women probably want the ability to do things for their house, do things for their partner, do things for their family, and it seems kind of silly to pretend as though this is some unique mindset of men, that men have some sort of inner life that women just can't possibly comprehend. But again, this is a really good example of men needing to go to therapy, men needing to figure out how to talk about their emotions. It should not be like women's responsibility to talk to their partner and be like, oh, you're really going through a tough spell, dude. It's like, no, if you as a male are having psychological problems relating to the fact that your role in that household has changed, it would be very, very helpful if you could summon your courage, because clearly men don't fear anything that isn't going to kick their ass. Summon your courage, sit down with your partner and be like, look, I am having difficulty making this adjustment, and I'm more than happy to help you because I'm a good partner, but I just need you to understand it's a little weird for me right now. And I feel weird, and I'm going to be acting weird, and I don't want you to take that personally. This is just something I'm going through. That's a lot more helpful than like the woman being forced to approach their partner and being like, just for you, blowjobs every night this week because you picked up the kids from school. You did the bare minimum.
Ew. Joel.
Uh, this is how Steve thinks about the world. I mean, literally, I'm just referring back to what he talked about. He's like, don't wear your t-shirts to bed, ladies. Wear a little lingerie. Respect the fact that men are providers. I mean, even flip that around. He's like, you need to respect the fact that your man's been working super hard. And here you have an example where in his own, like, the way he's defined the problem, the woman is like working lots of overtime, taking on additional responsibilities at work. And he's not like, men, pick up the slack. You need to be giving your wife oral every night because she deserves it because she's a queen. Like, Steve doesn't seem to understand that women also have brains and they also have psychology and they also feel bad at times and they also sometimes need emotional support. He's like, nope, you can't expect men to do that. Just pick up the pace. You're working hard at work. You got to pick up after he did like a horrible job at dinner and couldn't bother to be doing the dishes. And then you also got to do him like the coaching session every night because that's what men need to be successful.
I think we should write a book that is word for word exactly this book, but directly like changing the gender roles in this. So if he's not picking up the kids from school, if he's not, being a good housewife, he's not wearing lingerie to bed, get him out, divorce him.
Is the male lingerie just like a banana hammock?
Don't ever say that to me ever again.
Okay. Naomi, I'm gonna do you a favor. We're gonna get through the rest of these myths and wrap it up pretty soon. I do just want to like talk about this in maybe more specific terms. This myth. I like the idea that couples should be constantly reaffirming each other, as you said. I like this idea that like part of relationship is constant communication and support, and that you can't like let that aspect of your relationship slack off even when you get busy, when you're overwhelmed. But he keeps reframing this conversation to be all about how the man is the top shit, how the woman never has any of these problems, and how she's always going to be expected to like step up when the man's feeling down. And I would say this is not bad advice. It just needs to be gender neutral, right? Tell your wife the same stuff, Steve. Tell her you're proud of her for the work she does and the people she helps and how she makes your life better and how the kids won't stop talking about how they love her when she's gone and how your son wants her at the school for career day. Tell her that you feel special, that she wants to provide for you and keep you happy and healthy, and you feel so safe and comfortable when she works these hours, and that you want to know if there's anything else you can do to make her evenings easier. Love is mutual support, But Steve doesn't think that's the case. He thinks it's male-centered ego masturbation, and that's the real problem with this advice. Just one other note, Steve wants you to only pursue men who have their shit together, but you should also be willing to put up with male sulking and tantrums. He's like, some men actually might be okay with dating a woman who makes more, but they will bitch and complain the entire time before you quiet them down and give them counseling. And that's just normal, right? So, like, success for Steve, again, is just, like, financially successful, not like, oh, you figured out, like, all of your mental demons and become, like, a more actualized person. Whatever. Two more myths. These are super fast. The first one is myth 4: men expect and want strong, independent women to lower their standards or get comfortable being alone. I kind of feel we've already covered this.
Yeah.
But his framing in this is no joke, that women who are successful have the idea that they can get men who are just as successful as them and that they need to be more realistic, which is like technically true when you look at stuff like college degree acquisitions by sexes. But his advice is literally women have too high of standards and need to not lower them. His advice is literally women have too high of standards and need to adjust them to more realistic standards, which is like, hey, Steve, you're a man who's expecting strong, independent women to lower their standards. So I don't know if he's disproving this myth. It certainly feels like he's exactly doing what he says is a myth, but whatever. Last myth, and I have to wonder, Naomi, if you've ever heard of this one. Men who date and marry independent women are lazy and just looking for sugar mamas to take care of them.
Okay.
You know, the common myth that men who date women who are more successful than them are just looking for a sugar mama. I don't like the phrase sugar mama. Should it be like sugar mommy?
No,
it should be sugar mommy if it's sugar daddy.
No, it's sugar mama.
You don't. It's not sugar dada.
Ew! Don't say that. Stop. Just stop.
Okay. Like, I don't know. I don't even know how to address that, because again, it just feels like he's manufacturing arguments that have no basis in the real world. Like, these are not things people have said, Steve. You're just like coming up with stuff in order to like knock down the dominoes and prove yourself right. The reason I want to discuss this chapter, Naomi, is because I was baffled when I first read this. I first read this and I'm like, similar to the stuff about him like raising kids and child rearing, it just didn't seem to fit the topic of the book. And I was like, why is he wasting so much time on this? Successful women were not the main focus of his last book. He like discussed them in a chapter or two. But I think he's probably doing two things here. The first is that reassuring that the people reading this that his advice actually works. And also that men have done nothing wrong and any woman who's unsuccessful in dating is actually the problem. He wants to make it clear to his audience that it's not that men are insecure in their masculinity and don't want to date a woman who has advanced degrees higher than his level of education. It's that these women always don't smile enough, or they don't baby talk their partner efficiently. I'm not trying to debunk this and assert that every man is a huge sexist piece of shit. I'm trying to say that I find it far more likely that men have sexist notions about relationships, and I think that's more likely the case than not, than women are completely dropping the ball when looking for love. I don't think the majority of women who are successful walk around with like a permanent scowl on their face or are constantly talking about their Maserati. I think he wants to stereotype that way in order to once again disprove the notion that men have anything wrong with their psychology and approach to dating. But that advice, that hypothesis about this only works if there's any chance that Steve's advice is wrong. And since we know we can't disprove what he says, I'm probably just an idiot.
Yeah. Wait, what? I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I need a mustache. I need a big caterpillar mustache so I can then take a photo of myself with a big caterpillar mustache and write a successful dating advice book.
Joel, you already have the mustache. You're just going to have to shave the beard.
No deal.
Yeah.
Turn your camera back on. Would I look good with like a handlebar mustache?
Deal or no mustache? That's the book.
Would I look kind of like a cowboy or like a professional wrestler if I like did a handlebar?
I feel like you definitely look like Jack Black in the Nacho Libre.
Did he even have facial hair?
I don't think so. You just give that vibe.
And he's like, Joel, you kind of resemble a chubby character actor.
Nachos would be so good right now with some pickled jalapenos. Oh yeah, that'd be
Naomi, I had
good.
nachos yesterday. I am living your best life.
I'm so mad at you right now. That sounds delightful.
It's okay. The beer cheese was pretty awful, but like the rest was pretty solid.
Damn, I'm sorry for your loss of good cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Steve Harvey. Straight Talk, No Chaser, Part 2. Once again, he's done the impossible. He's proven that all men are perfect and all women are too stupid to realize that they frown too much.
Woohoo!
I should say now, Naomi, you've been frowning too much this entire podcast. I know your screen actually hasn't been on. I haven't been able to see your face, but like I know you've been frowning. And that's the reason you can't date men who are less successful than you.
Yeah, you're right. That's why I need to smile more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This
Well,
book should just be called Ladies. Why don't you smile more?
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. With the come on. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, audience,
Ladies, if you smiled more, you could be invited to more threesomes with couples
ew.
on the Thunder app.
Oh my god. Okay, we're done.
Tying
Audience,
it all together.
we love
Tying it all
you.
together.
We love you so much. Go give us a like or a good review on any of our podcast streaming platforms. We also have a Patreon, and if you're willing to, if you love us enough, I'm just kidding, go subscribe to that, and we love you very much. Wear a condom. Have a great week.
We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at @DateTheseGuys or visit datetheseguys.org. If you have questions for the podcast or want to be a wealthy sugar parent, please send an email to datetheseguys@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our work, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/datetheseguys. We have behind-the-scenes information, early episode access, participation in polls, and exclusive access to a guy sibling map of date ideas for the Arizona area. Since the world sucks right now, we are currently donating all Patreon proceeds to trans organizations like the Trevor Project, a trans suicide prevention organization, and moving assistance funds for those fleeing states outlawing their very existence. Please consider becoming a member and supporting our work today.